Jesus, UFOs, and Atlantis. What do they all have to do with each other? This is incredible. Get in here. This is Cosmic Road, where I discuss UFOs and the paranormal. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it to be notified of future videos. Drop a like, and please comment below as I'm going through it and let me know what you think. Okay, let's dive in. The following material is based on Dolores Cannon's book, Jesus in the Essenes. Now, I'm not a religious person. In fact, I've been an atheist for most of my life until recently, until the last 3 years, say, when I have started to have my own paranormal spiritual encounters. And that's a whole nother video, or series of videos maybe. But I have become interested in the topic, let us say, and I have come across, I research a lot of near-death experiences as well as alien abductions. And in near-death experiences, sometimes people will see Jesus. Sometimes people will see Jesus hanging out with aliens. Yeah, Jesus hangs out with aliens on the other side, at least according to several near-death experiences. And there have been multiple alien abductions when the aliens have mentioned Jesus. In fact, at least on 1 or 2 occasions, they have told people to follow the teachings of Jesus, not necessarily the religion, however. So that was really interesting. That got my attention, and I've always been kind of curious what that meant. I'm not really a religious person. I don't go to church. Was an atheist. So what are the teachings of Jesus, other than what's in the Bible, so if I was going to get to the true Jesus, outside of the religion and the dogma, what would that look like? If that's what the beings are suggesting that people do. So I was really interested when I came across Dolores Cannon's book, Jesus in the Essenes. And I just finished that, and I'm reading the follow-up book to that right now. But it was fascinating. It is mind-blowing. I mean, it is easily one of, if not the most fascinating books I've ever read. Now, to be fair, a lot of the book, more than half of it deals with the Essenes, and not necessarily Jesus. Okay, so the Essenes are the secretive group, nominally Jewish, but kind of a people apart. They lived apart. They probably came from different genetic stock. They believe different things, although they did follow the Jewish law, and generally. But yeah, they lived in this interesting town called Qumran that had secretive defenses. And this information is channeled information, if you can call it channeled information. That's how I think of it. Dolores Cannon specialized in past life regression hypnosis. She also did the same thing with alien abductions. And, I talk about the different silos of information. Well, Dolores Cannon and several related hypnotherapists have a very interesting, different take on alien abductions than people like David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins. Those are different silos of information about alien abduction that I will get more into later in a different video. But for this video, what's important is that Dolores Cannon regresses people to past lives, and usually, they're just everyday people. In fact, they almost exclusively are just everyday people. Which validates a lot of it, because you would think that if you were going to have a fantasy about a past life, that you would be Napoleon or somebody. So she never gets that. It's always just everyday people. But one time she got an everyday person that was in a scene in this small Jewish community living at the time of Jesus. And this fellow, whose name is Sudi, or was Sudi, he is the person that is narrating the story. It's a story of his life. Well, he becomes one of the teachers of Jesus. I know, right? Pretty crazy. But it feels very authentic. It's, I don't think that the subject, the patient, was at all disingenuous, and I don't think that Dolores Cannon was disingenuous. It all feels very authentic. Like I said, most of the book is about the daily life of the Essenes and their culture, who they are, what they are. You always have to leave open the possibility that there could be a trickster being or that we're being fed disinformation by the phenomenon. But, a lot of it is just the daily life of these simple people. But not so simple because they are a fascinating group of people. And so like I said, I'm going to go on the assumption that this is authentic information until it can be debunked or proven otherwise. It feels very authentic. It's very detailed. It's very, it's not something that you would find in history books. Some of it could be in different lore. If this person was extremely widely read, which she was not. She was a young woman, never even graduated high school. This is the subject or the patient or whatever. So for this past life regression. So it feels very authentic. I'm going to assume that it is. You make up your own mind. I encourage you to check out the book. It's called Jesus and the Essenes. That's Essenes. So anyway, let's moving on. This secretive group of people seem to have been formed or had their culture formed by the people of Atlantis. So this group, the Essenes, they have technology from Atlantis. Well, they don't call it Atlantis. They said they were given this by the Cthulhu, that is the secretive people that go around the world. They were survivors of a great cataclysm, and now they started, after the cataclysm, they went to Egypt, and now they kind of go around finding people to impart knowledge and give technology to. And among this technology are light bulbs. That's right, the people of the Essenes had light bulbs 2,000 years ago. Now, Sudi, the fellow who was a scholar of the Torah and who became Jesus' teacher for like 6 years or something, he had a light bulb. He didn't know what it was. He didn't know how to create it. That wasn't his job. His people, the Essenes, had, if they ever had the ability to create these things, had lost it. But it was a globe that he would set on like a charging station or something, and it would light up. And it was clearly electric or something. I mean, I guess you could say it could be some sort of spiritual or metaphysical thing. But yeah, it seems to be an electric light bulb of some ancient type. Given to the Essenes by the Cthulhu, which really line up with the people of Atlantis when you research Atlantis and what was said to have happened. And anyway, the Cthulhu are the people of Atlantis for all intents and purposes. They're the Atlanteans. So they were given this technology. They also had a crystal pyramid which they could charge with energy. Only the mystery school of the Essenes could operate the crystal pyramid. It did not operate off of electricity, but chi or whatever you want to call it, the force. It operated off of the force. I'm using that a little facetiously, but not really, because I know this stuff exists. So but only the mystery school could use the pyramid and various other devices. And they knew that that the planets revolved around the sun. They thought there were 10 planets, interestingly, which is something that scientists today think is very possible, that there is another planet that has an erratic orbit that is very far out there. So so the Essenes, long before Galileo or anyone else believed that the planets revolved around the sun, 10 planets, they had a horoscope. They had a orrery, although I do think that they did use horoscopes. They were of that persuasion. And they had various other devices, technologies, and knowledge that were passed on to them by the people of Atlantis. And they had a lot of, they began meditating and doing spiritual practices when they were like 3 years old. And they all had psychic abilities to some extent or another. For example, when the king died, they knew several days in advance that the king was going to die. And they had these abilities, and they could go out of body, they could astral project. Just an amazing group of people, and they were in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus, and they had the prophecies that Jesus was going to come, and he did during the lifetime of this fellow Sudi. And it was a very big event in the book when they're watching the stars come together. And the Star of Bethlehem is very interesting in this book. It's 4 stars that come together. And apparently there was a wise man that followed each star, which would mean there were 4 wise men. But something happened to one of the wise men, and there were only 3. So the 4 stars come together, form the Star of Bethlehem, and it shines down on Bethlehem, which is where the Messiah was said to be born. And skipping ahead, Jesus comes to Sudi and is taught by the Essenes. They have this, ancient knowledge from Atlantis, and Jesus is taught this ancient Atlantean knowledge. Mind blown, right? I mean, that's some pretty crazy stuff. So he was taught these meditation techniques. I'm sure he was taught astral projection, all this kind of stuff. But Sudi says he was an amazing student. Basically, you didn't even need to teach him anything, and he knew everything instantly. And So and he was mystical. He had abilities. The Essenes practiced hands-on healing, and which is something that I'm learning in my own life, and it is a thing. However, when Jesus did it, actual light would come out of his hands. So, it's pretty interesting, right? And keep in mind that I have been an atheist all my life, and I find this so fascinating. I didn't even know if there was a historical Jesus. But it appears that there was an historical Jesus, and he wasn't just some guy that was the leader of a cult. He was Jesus. Yeah, and okay, and this is interesting. Apparently, he had light red hair and possibly gray eyes. Sudi said sometimes they would appear blue, sometimes they would appear green, sometimes they were gray. So that was interesting. And also his cousin, who was the same age as John the Baptist. So I always thought John the Baptist was an old guy and not related to Jesus. But apparently, no, they were the same age. And Sudi, the teacher, instructed them both in the same class. And they were the only 2 students that he had for those years that he was teaching them. So very interesting, and I know this is going to ruffle some feathers. I apologize if you're a religious person and this goes against, what you've been taught. But trying to get this information out there, it's really fascinating to me. Trying to get to the bottom of who Jesus was, if he was. Well, according to this book, he was, and according to a lot of aliens, he was, and near-death experiences. So Jesus exists. And he was Jesus. He wasn't just some schlub preaching some crazy stuff, some hippie. He wasn't just some dirty hippie of the Roman times. No, it was Jesus. So really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. But yeah, so he was taught by the Essenes. He went on to learn from other teachers and other masters. His uncle apparently was a very wealthy tin merchant, and that was Joseph of Arimathea, the guy who eventually gives up his tomb, or not. And according to Sudi, he does not give up his tomb. That tomb was for Jesus. He was a wealthy tin merchant, and he had tin mines in England, which is apparently the only place where tin could be refined. And he would take Jesus all over in his travels, especially England. And Jesus learned from the Druids or possibly the Phoenicians there. And yeah, I didn't know the Phoenicians were ever in England, but apparently they were. And they had red hair and blue eyes. Apparently, the word Phoenician means the red-haired ones, which is not what they called themselves. That's what others called them. And some people think they may be the descendants or the survivors of Atlantis. And as Dolores Cannon was researching this, she discovered or was told by Sudi, I believe, that that Atlantis wasn't one culture or one civilization, that it was a continent and there were multiple governments and peoples there, which is fascinating. So could the Colu be one group and the Phoenicians be another group? Because apparently the Phoenicians were in England like 4000 BC, and they were, masters of the sea. So it kind of makes sense that the masters of the sea would come from Atlantis. There's also some evidence that they visited the Americas. There's a really fascinating ruin called, colloquially, the Stonehenge of North America, which is a really interesting locale. And the only writing on it is Phoenician. And they use megalithic construction like they do in Stonehenge. And she goes into, Dolores Cannon talks about Stonehenge in another interview or video. And maybe I can talk about that more later. But there is a connection with the Phoenicians and Stonehenge, potentially. Anyway, so moving on, really interesting stuff. We've got Jesus learning from Atlantis, from the people of Atlantis, also possibly the Druids, and possibly the Phoenicians, which also may have been a different group from Atlantis. I know this is all pretty crazy, but I'm buying it. And read the book and to decide for yourself. Really interesting stuff. Okay, but what about aliens? I said Jesus, UFOs, and Atlantis. Where do the aliens come into it except, in these crazy near-death experiences or a couple of alien abductions where they say, follow the teachings of Jesus? Well, as it happens, the Essenes were visited by people from other worlds. That's right, the Essenes dealt with aliens. Sudi, who we are getting this information from, this scholar from Jesus' time, the master of the Torah, who taught in their school, the Essenes school. He taught the law, the Jewish law. Well, he knew of people from other worlds, and he said they would come and interact with the Essenes. So not only did the Essenes regularly get visits from the Colu, the survivors of Atlantis, they also regularly received visitors from aliens. So you've got to ask yourself if all of that is true, and Jesus was there for years and had regular interactions with the Essenes, and it seems like he incorporated a lot of his teachings and beliefs. He incorporated a lot of the Essene culture into his teachings and beliefs. And that's going to be controversial, but yeah. It's interesting. So Jesus, being the Messiah, having, we know the aliens apparently liked his teachings. So is it a stretch to think that they may have had some interaction with Jesus during his time on this planet? Now, Sudi doesn't say anything like that. And in fact, Sudi is very... he doesn't even want to talk about Jesus for a lot of the time. The interviewer kind of has to trick him into talking about Jesus because he doesn't want to betray any information about Jesus because he is being hunted by Herod and the authorities. So so it's a big secret, and but yeah, so really fascinating to think that Jesus may have had some interactions with aliens. Now, I guess that shouldn't be so surprising since a lot of aliens seem to be not just people from other worlds, but actual higher dimensional beings. Anyway, so that's it. We've got Jesus learning ancient secret knowledge from Atlantis, dealing with Druids, possibly Phoenicians, also possibly people from Atlantis, possibly interacting with aliens. It seems very likely. And if not just regular aliens from our reality, then maybe aliens from a level above. Just super fascinating stuff. I love it, and it's very juicy. And I hope this video doesn't rub you guys the wrong way. This isn't going to become a religious channel, although I do think that it's important to talk about these more metaphysical ideas. I think that's a big part of what is going on with the phenomenon, is more higher dimensional metaphysical sort of stuff. And I think that's worth talking about. Let me know in the comments below if you want to hear more about that sort of thing, or if you want to focus more on just the aliens themselves. As always, please give this video a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Like I said, comment below. Let me know what you think about this material. I think this is fascinating. Again, I encourage you to go check out that book, Dolores Cannon's Jesus and the Essenes. There's a lot more crazy material in that book. Maybe I can go over some of that later if you like this video. Please hit the subscribe button, and if you do, the bell next to it to be notified of future videos. And I would love it if you would share this on social media. Get the word out about what we're doing on Cosmic Road. Until next time, Cosmic Road out.